Steve Schmidt. So I am the host of Maker Connect. This is a podcast where I think we've got about 38 episodes recorded so far, about 24 published. So we've chatted with everybody from heads of procurement to heads of revenue. And really our concept and idea is that we want to get usually 5 to 6 questions, and they're sort of the same for everybody, but the answers are so different. Some groups might train you on being brute force, right? We believe that it starts with trust, and that inherently in there's skill sets that need to be taught, just like, I'm teaching my kid boundaries right now.
I'm totally with you, right? I'm totally with you. I mean, it's easy in the club industry to take a big hammer brute force approach, but I'm totally with you on the trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's not there, and you get to a negotiation, God forbid, it gets really ugly, right? Because then it's just about taking cuts into each other versus trying to form a partnership where both people can stay whole and profitable. It makes sense to do the business. Yeah. And I think talking through that and we bring up another question we like to ask is, tell me about your perception of real life negotiations versus the movies. And you go like Wolf of Wall Street, like let's pick that one apart, right? We don't negotiate like that on the broad public. I'll back it up.
Think of like a power broker, right? Power broker comes in and you're having these, these intense, head to head, knuckle to knuckle.
Do the deal today.
Kind of negotiation.
We got it done,
Right. It's so not Hollywood.
We got them, nope, that doesn't work. General Mills is not doing that when they're buying, whatever filler for their cereal. It is
hopefully it's a conversation like you and I are having right now, right? It's a conversation. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're looking for. This is where we line up. This is where we don't line up. Okay. How do we work this out? How do we get the right thing done?
Yeah. Well, and this is the next question that's interesting, right? So we might say, cool, that sounds nice. In the real world, it can be different, right? There's so many nuances and there's very little this kumbaya moment where everybody just goes, we're going to do this. We just got to get along. Right. And so another question I like to ask is, how do you balance the tension of urgency while giving negotiation the space that it deserves?
Yeah, it really helps to understand, for me to understand, try to look at it through their lens, right? Try to understand, okay, where are they trying to go with this? What are they trying to gain by this? Hopefully they're making that clear in the negotiation, but a lot of times it's not really clear. It's clear what their bosses want, but it's not always clear. I don't know how I put that into words, but trying to really understand how do we accomplish a goal that we both could walk away with and have a win. Takes some understanding of them, takes some relationship of the person you're working across the desk with, and certainly takes some patience. Because certainly when you get into a stalemate, it's the instinct is to go into badger mode, right? And that's when you start taking the gloves off and having those kinds of conversations. And that seldom ends well. It's not usually a win for you don't get the best deal that everybody is looking for.
Ultimately, do you think there's a saying in life, right? I think it's flipped, where people used to say, like, if you know what you want, go get it, right? And I think now that we've kind of been 3 or 4 years into this, what everybody would always have to admit is a different world we're living in. It seems that doesn't work anymore, that people got hammered with that during COVID, right? Everybody was buying things. And then we all went and looked at it afterwards and went, well, that doesn't mean anything. Like, I don't have anything to show for it. And now we're in this recession. Everybody's kind of like, oh my gosh, like nobody trusts anybody. Nobody really has the capital. If they do, they're holding on to it. Yet sellers have been taught to go ask for the same thing, right? We haven't given the same sort of mindset approach that somebody would say they just, they're in a delicate relationship scenario, right? They're not going to hammer that person every day with reminders. Like let's say they were in a very important relationship and that relationship went south and now they're trying to rekindle things, right? And one person is going to change. If all they do is sell the idea of change, the other person will leave almost immediately.
Yeah.
If they understand the change that's required, even though they're not in a space to be like, oh yeah, I know I can't fix this today, but they're committed to it and over time they see it, then that person slowly on their terms builds trust back. But if they keep going, is that enough? It's going to turn them back every time and go into a negative deficit.
Yeah.
and you'll never be able to get back to baseline of that relationship. Now here, I view it the same way. Is like the relationship starts day one. Are we entering into a deficit? Are we net neutral? Or do we have an advantage?
And I mean, transparency is just so, it's such an active tool in that, right? I think the more in conversations, in negotiations, people are willing to give you a peek behind the curtain and say, listen,
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're trying to do, and this is why. The better you can understand what's kind of going on behind the curtain, the better, the more trust. All right. That just establishes trust, that
Mm-hmm.
transparency. And when that continues as a pattern, transparency, hopefully, and usually, in most of my negotiations and conversations, usually transparency is rewarded with more transparency,
Yeah.
right? If I see they're being transparent with me, hey, I can open up a little bit and be more transparent.
Yeah.
The higher the walls go up on both sides. The lower the walls come down, they come down better on both sides, and it just allows those conversations to
Mm-hmm.
flow more smoothly and hopefully find a middle ground.
Have you seen or been a part of a negotiation ever where you got into it and you were surprised that you won the deal? Or
Um,
did you always know
yeah,
like you're in the deal, like I'm gonna win it. It's just a matter of winning how much?
yeah. I mean, that happens. That happens quite a bit, really. I mean, particularly with CPGs, right? When you're working with big companies, they bring in their sales teams, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a very specific agenda. And a lot of times it's really hard to see that, okay, our agenda, especially in the club industry, our agenda is very different from what a CPG's agenda is.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, particularly old school, and even still, a CPG's agenda is going to be SKUs. We want SKUs, we
Yep.
want shelf space, we want lots of variety. And in the club business, we don't want any of that. We want very little variety. We want one SKU, but we're
Yep.
going to drive volume. And what we want is volume. And there's times when you have, your armies of marketing people on the one side, and you got, a buyer and a couple of folks on the other side. And you're thinking, they're not tuned into volume. A lot of the marketing teams are just not tuned into volume. They're tuned into their brand, and they
Yes.
want, what they want SKUs, they want their brand. They got this, these three new flavors, and they're getting paid to get those three new flavors out on the street. They don't care about volume. That's not their deal. But
That's how they're measured, to your point, right?
that's how they're measured. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To get the right people involved in the conversation, get, maybe your primary salesperson involved, maybe you get somebody in operations, you get somebody a little bit higher in the food chain involved in that conversation. They can get a little bit of a higher view. And then
Mm-hmm.
it can start to open doors to where they'll, recognize the volume piece of it. Say, okay, let's stand down on the SKUs piece. Let's see if we can drive that same volume on
Yeah.
the existing SKU we have, and we try to turn those conversations. And sometimes, you make some headway. Sometimes you make a lot of headway. Sometimes not so much headway. But
I got to ask you. So you just said something really interesting. And marketing traditionally is not measured on volume or revenue impact, right?
no,
And then you have sales who is, but those two people are essentially doing the same thing, right? Do you feel there's
hmm
some combativeness natively to that, the very nature of that relationship?
oh yeah, for sure, right? Sales guys are on an island a little bit, right? You got marketing teams that have their agenda, and you've got the operations teams that have their agenda, and you got the sales guy who's not even in between. He's a third data point out there somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
And yeah, all three have different agendas, and I internally, yeah, I think there's a lot of friction among all three of those. Certainly more friction between the sales teams and the operations teams
Yeah.
than there is between sales and marketing. But yeah, they all have a different bullseye in the middle of their target.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild to me when you think about negotiation too. Now, are you seeing any, there's articles out there that we've shared before, pardon me, about Walmart starting to implement AI in their negotiation process and their procurement process. Are you seeing that in this space at all?
Not in our business, not in the club business. No.
Okay.
I mean, we're
Not,
such a limited SKU environment that we can talk individual items, and virtually every conversation is about individual items. When you're buying for a Walmart, you're negotiating for a Walmart or something similar. You're talking a chain that's got 50, 60, 70, maybe 100,000 SKUs, right? You don't talk individual items, you talk categories, you talk, you know, places, specific amounts of geography within your warehouse, within your store. So, yeah, I think our conversations go quite a bit different than what
Hmm.
they would in a typical retailer, or certainly in a Walmart or a supercenter.
So let's talk about that. So describe to me pretty clearly what are the nuances and the differences in your business versus that traditional non-club or CPG business?
Well, I mean that like we just talked about, just we talk about each item stands on its own. So we're all about, as a buying team, we're all about each individual item. Let's have a conversation about this item. We're all about volume. We're not concerned. We're not really concerned about selection. We're creating excitement and we're looking for the new and greatest, the new widget, the new thing out there for sure. But at the same time, on the basic blocking and tackling, we're looking for just driving volume on that individual item, and what are the levers that we can pull on that individual item that we can make this thing more exciting and get more people to put it in their shopping cart. And so I think it's a very different conversation. The other retailers, I didn't work for them, but I can imagine their conversations are generally more categorical. We've got this much space. This is the category. We have this many SKUs in the category. You have this many SKUs of those SKUs that are within that category. How do we work within those parameters? In the club business, there's not those parameters. People say, okay, well, how many SKUs do you have in that category? Well, that depends what's selling, right? It could be, we could have 2 or we could have 8. There's no rule as to how many SKUs need to go in that category. So that's not even on our radar as a negotiating parameter.
Yeah.
So that that's one big piece of it. The other big piece of it, which maybe isn't, well, yeah, I mean, in a general retail environment, the business is very segmented to where you have teams that specialize in a function. And then, the next team specializes, you have procurement, you've got, traffic, you've got, I don't even know what all those different, we need a retailer up here that could say these are all the different areas. And so, we call it throwing it over the wall, right? So a vendor will come in, they'll do their first presentation on an item. Okay, we made it past the first hurdle. This person liked our item. They want to have another conversation. It gets tossed over the wall to the next team. The next team catches it, and then their job is to do their piece, take on their due diligence, and then if it passes that muster, it goes over the next wall. With Costco, and with really, I think the club environment, I think it's the same with BJ's, with Sam's. The buyer, as an individual, is responsible for that item all the way from its ideation, the first glimmer in its eye, through creation of the item, developing of the packaging, developing of the specifications. In some instances, if it's not already a prepared item, bringing that item in, what's the distribution going to be, negotiating the costing, the marketing program, the whatever is going to go behind driving that sales, managing the sales through the whole process, all the way through to the time when that item may be sunsetted sometime down the way. It's all under that same buyer's purview. And then he's got a stack of people, he or she, they have a stack of people beneath them that support them, a team that supports them. And so that's unusual for the general retail trade, that one person is responsible for that product all the way through the chain. And it really makes a difference from a sales perspective. If you're on a sales and marketing team or a CPG, you take a very different approach at how you sell, how you come to market with that product.
How'd you end up where you are?
All kind of by chance, I guess, which, my story is really pretty common for a ton of folks my age in the club business, particularly in Costco. I started just pushing shopping carts, that advanced to stocking shelves, and then that advanced to, a bottom level position as an inventory control person in a buying office. And then, you just slowly kind of work your way up through the system. So I have no college education, but it's, the beauty of that company, and really the industry kind of functions that way. That there's no glass ceiling based on your education level. So a lot of us have been able to do a lot with very little education. And people go, wow, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing, right?
Those are what they call grit and get it done jobs, where it
Yeah.
just because I
I've
have an
been with one
education.
company for 36 years, right? I retired after 36 years. And people say, oh my gosh, 36 years with one company and you've been doing that, that same thing. And I said, within the company, I'm a dime a dozen.
Well, there's something pretty cool about that too. I mean, it's being so
for sure.
great at something, I used to want to be great. I said I want to be the greatest salesperson to ever live. I
Hmm.
don't feel that way anymore. I'm 46, and
Did you
it's
get
not that
there?
I feel I did okay. Like I did. Let me answer that differently. No, I had it wrong the whole time. So I've been through 2 divorces, 46 years old. Didn't really lift my head up to see why am I working this hard. Just kept my head down saying, well, if I just did this, if I just did that, then I'll get enough money to do this thing. And then that,
Right.
and, but also I'm 5.5 years sober. So this is a mindset that was already toxic. Right. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
got sober, I didn't know what else to do after like 6 months of like being like, okay, I'm a good guy. Like I've been going to AA, I'm going to stay sober. And my wife at the time, who's still a great friend of mine, we're actually trying to slowly rekindle things over years of trust. She's like, you should start a business. And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know about that. I'm like, I don't have any experience running P&Ls. Well, I could sell very well. And so started a business and we were doing about half a million in revenue a month within 10 months. But our margins were
It's a
negative,
lot.
negative 12%. About 18 months into it, we were contacted by a software company that wanted to acquire us. That acquisition took 6 months, happened, completely fell apart like the next day. And so lost like $1.8 million and started all over.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
And so for me, I could sit there and like lick my wounds and be like, well, they really got me and my life and all the, financial woes that can come with a divorce. And I have to look at it and go, well, you really never approach things in a way that took risk into accord. I was always taught as a salesperson to go get it done. Right. And
right.
so all those little favors on the deals piled up when you had 56 customers, $1,000 a month at a time over 12 months, that's $6 million. And so that started, or 600,000 bucks. It started to feel like pain after I had coaches and who were like, well, I can't save you. Like this is, you got to close the company. And I was too proud to close the company because it would have ended the same anyway. Instead, I had a bunch
Right.
of pissed off employees who made it over the fence into a merger they were happy about. And then, I was the person on the hill who just, we got slaughtered, you know? And so
Mm.
6 months of tucking your tail between your legs while, going through a divorce, while trying to restart your life and having, kids with somebody, it was one of those eye-opening moments where I was like, I think I'm doing it wrong. As a matter
Well,
of fact,
look at how
I'm
much smarter you are now,
so self-aware.
right?
I mean, I do, well, I pour my time into 4 hours of therapy, not listening to sales books
Yeah.
because I know all that
And that's
shit.
valuable, right? I mean, you learn life skills,
I
lots of
never
life
learned them.
skills,
That's the funny thing. I never learned those life skills.
but
I
now
never
you
set a
have.
boundary in my life until last week. And so it's just wild because everybody in that field goes, oh, you didn't know that was? Just like I go, you don't know what an SQL is? Sales qualified lead. They go, no, why would I give a shit? Except for these are core fundamental skills to live life well. And I've only
Right.
been paying attention to core fundamental skills that make me the best salesperson. And then so the
And
only
you're now
skills
going to
you,
be a better person for it.
yeah. I was basically teaching myself to be a narcissist by only caring about the results that I could provide for other people. And if it didn't go my way, I
Right.
would force it to happen till it did.
Right.
And so like it was this combat because I'm like, well, wait, I'm not but eventually your identity gets tied up and you can only be one thing when you aren't trying to live life. So that was a negotiation with myself constantly of never paying attention to the true value of something and constantly think that volume could make up for it. No amount of volume in the world can make up for a lack of quality.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
that's like the big lesson I learned. And now my new company that I use and consult with the Maker Group on is a revenue. We go very slow. We're very careful. I work 6 hours a day, not 16. And we're highly profitable on our way to 2 million in the second year. And I'm just like, okay, there you go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. As a podcasting group.
Podcast is just one part of what we do. We're a full revenue consultancy. So we use podcasts as one lever of community to
Uh,
get people to formulate around that brand so that they can get an awareness of who they are. Outside of that, we are guerrilla, like very personalized account-based marketing into the enterprise, one email at a time, very well written.
Got it.
things like that.
Okay.
So yeah, we're like a boutique revenue consultancy for people who know it's the right way and can afford to take the time to get it done right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and this is probably good marketing for you guys, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, believe it or not, about
somebody says,
25,
"Gee, what are you guys about? Why should I have you guys help manage my business?" Well, here, let me point you to our podcast.
that's all we do. Yeah.
And
Yep. And then they see brands that they know and they can ping those people and say, hey,
hmm,
you
yeah,
were on this podcast, and we convert 52% of the people who show up on the podcast to paying customers. Now, we don't expect to do that. We don't have any, it just like that's because they spent time with us. They understand what we do.
all
We
right,
understand them, and we walk away and give them recordings, and everybody gets a free ticket to the negotiation class should they want to attend, right? It's free. It's interesting because when you look at it, you go, is that manipulation? You go, no, it's just a law of attraction versus promotion.
yeah, yeah,
So,
I would agree. How big is your team?
so my team is 6 people and we support the maker group. So I'm like full-time fractional revenue with the maker group. So I oversee their sales and revenue. And then I own my company. And then I do that for three of our companies. I sit as a fractional seat for and help kind of guide and forecast and get to where we need to get strategically. And then I have like 3 rev ops people, 2 content, and a video editor who sit underneath. And we make it happen every day. It's fun.
Wow, wow, that's
Yeah.
cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. No cold
Um,
calls. We stopped doing that.
yeah. Oh, God, that's a hard way to go, right? Oh,
Yeah. So I lived for 25 years. It's just, I would call 100 people every day and, you just get the funnel, you close it, da da da. Yeah, it's really fun now to sit into a negotiation and even think, well, how much are we willing to concede based off of how badly do we want to work with them?
mm,
Because that value and that experience is rich for us, right? We want to make money. We want to like
mhm.
what we do. We want to like their brand, but we still not, well, we now are in a position to go, we need the business. But I know well enough now to know that that business can flip to attrition and negative press if it's not the right fit.
Mhm.
And so we're very careful about how we do that. And just if we build it brick by brick, everything that everybody said would be the case is the case.
Completely different quality mindset from where you were however many years ago, right?
I would wake up, start working at 4:30, reports, call at 8 o'clock with the team, red, yellow, green, where we got a triage today. And now I wake up and bring my son to school and
Mm,
I show up at 10 and I see the people are doing it. And I'm like, well, what's the difference?
right, right.
It's it's our approach to it, and it starts with me. Unfortunately, it's like if I set the pace.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and 2 of those people who worked in the previous company have actually come back now to work with me here, and I feel very fortunate because I've been able to rebridge their trust. And they're like,
Well,
"Dude,
sounds like you've got enough experience, good and bad. Sometimes the bad is
I
more,
needed
you
the
learn
bad.
more
Yeah, I needed
than
the
the
bad.
good, right?
Yeah,
You're the right guy with the right headspace to lead this thing.
yeah.
I
Well,
think that's
well.
good.
The funny part is you laugh. We may as well say this out loud. We were talking about AI. My head, like a lot of salespeople, is always action oriented, right? And
Hmm.
I knew one of the things that with my ex-wife, regardless of whether we ever reunion or just get to be really good co-parents together, she has really good boundaries. And so we'd be talking. I was like, oh my God, this feels like jail to me. Like, I'm like, what do I say? And then all of a sudden I was like, I use ChatGPT in my job every day. What if I
Do you really?
took, well, yeah, I mean, we don't write emails with it, but we're researching with it, doing all sorts of things. And I said, what if I went, since it's private and I checked all the compliance, and I said, I'm going to import our text conversation the past 2 weeks since I made my amends and like went from like kind of freaking out to like pretty much understand what she would need to trying to understand what I need. Cause I was like, I don't know. And long story short is I imported it and ChatGPT started giving me suggestions on things I should read and things that I could do to
Did you, and
all of
you're a
it.
believer
I
in those? I
run
mean,
I run my day by it now. Now it's so innate because it
uh,
trained me the toolkit. Because I myself didn't have the call it the impulse control not to say like, hey, da 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 tech quick text, and she'd be like, she wouldn't answer. Well, why isn't she answering? She always answered me for 5.5 years. Dumbass, she's not your wife anymore. You guys separated, and she doesn't need to. And so like then ChatGPT would say like, Steve, boundaries are not confinement. Boundaries are creating a border for the conversation. They can expand and contract as you build trust. What she's looking for right now is simply to have a day on her own terms without you putting any emotional anything in there. And if you give that to her for multiple days in a row, that's called consistency. And when she says building trust, that's what she's looking for. And I was like, oh, that's easy. And so it was like, it took my brain though, because I don't study that stuff. Now I'm studying it
Right.
voraciously,
Right.
But at first it's stopping the impulse control, getting the response in a positive way that says, don't do that again, because you're just going to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's wild.
Are you still doing AA groups and some of those kinds of things?
I am. Yep.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I do AA. Right now, I'm deep into something on what they call emotional sobriety, which is like sobriety was not a problem for me. The problem was I replaced it with a work addiction, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's the emotional sobriety piece is the stuff that I'm pursuing, like boundaries, being completely not tied to an outcome, like that. So I joke because the work I'm needing to convince myself. My therapist is like, this work is for you. And I'm like, I know, but I don't believe it yet. And I'm being honest with you. So I could lie to you and say, yep, 100% it's for me. I said, but then I wouldn't be giving you accurate information to work with. So help make it about me, because I'm so used to that feeling selfish because I was called selfish. And so now by making it about me, I'm not being selfish. So it's very, very interesting, very wild.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That's
yeah,
great.
if we can use AI to do that, we can use AI to negotiate. And
Yeah, that's sort of interesting. I mean, I've played around with AI just because I'm sort of tech and I just
yeah,
like to mess around with it. And I don't know, I've gotten results quite a bit that were not. I was like, yeah, I don't think so. So enough that I've kind of lost a bit of faith in that. But so I don't really use ChatGPT very much anymore. And
I
I go
did.
back to the old fashioned way of just Googling it and reading and researching and, going to forums and that kind of thing.
I think
But
it has to be the thing in your, like, once you find something
should
that
go
in your
back.
personal life, I think
Hmm.
that's when people start to really see the benefit, whether it's journaling or weight loss, right? Or whatever. Like, it just starts to get to know you, and you wake up and it goes, good morning, Steve. And like when you use the right prompts, like it becomes your guide. And so I invested the time. I put about 10 hours to like program it to think and understand who we were as people and all of the background. So now it points back to things from 4 years ago.
Wait, when you say we were as people, you and your ex-wife.
My wife. So I'll say, it'll say like, hey, here's a question for you. And it'll go back in time. And so I put that in there and it remembers it and brings it into context.
Okay.
So it
Oh, that's
said,
interesting.
my
That's super
therapist said, this is
interesting.
actually really smart, Steve, because ChatGPT doesn't have emotions.
Yeah.
You have a lot of them. By putting it into there, you diffuse it into a way that you don't only get the free answer, you get to say it in a way then that you wouldn't process, oh, this is what I should say.
Hmm.
So it's cool from a behavioral standpoint. And negotiations, I think, are a lot about impulse control.
Yeah, I was going to say, so how in your conversations, how have you seen that work into negotiations? What would be an example where are retailers,
Mhm.
my background is retailing, right? So where are
Mhm.
retailers using Chat GPT in a productive way?
So they would go in and have price tables loaded within the software. So the maker group uses AI, right? So in their software, our software, we're able to say, here's the current average price trends within every, going on globally. And so it's going to ride that as sort of the fact and truth, the guide, the negotiation. It has all historical negotiations with this vendor. So you understand their plays better, like what they're probably going to do. For example, like Walmart, if you're dealing with them, it takes the last 6 years of when they went dark and predicts when the next go dark period is as a vendor. So you don't have to wonder when you're going to get in there and all of a sudden they go dark on you and you start clawing and kicking to get discounts. Because that's one of their best strategies. They just go dark for a week or 2 a year and everybody freaks out and goes, what's happening? They say they earn their discounts in that 2 week period of going dark to carry themselves through a whole year. And that's human
Wait, okay,
behavior.
so explain that. Who's going dark and why? What's the purpose?
Walmart's going dark on every one of their vendors who's trying to negotiate new deals with them. They just cut off communication.
To what end? To kind of extend that deal, their current deal?
To get better pricing. So while in active deal negotiations, they will look at when they have the most at risk during a year and then they go dark. And then that forces those vendors to go into a frenzy and start to discount prematurely. Super smart and very, very evil, but also.
Yeah, I was going to say it's, I'm tainted, but my first thought is that's so Walmart.
Yeah, totally. And like, that's why other people don't do it. Cause they're like, that's not for us. And I go, perfect. Cause I don't think it's that cool either.
It's along the same lines of them sending out an email saying, gee, we're going to reduce everybody's payment terms by, 10 days, or what was it they did a couple of years ago? Or was it a specific number? I forget. They did something with payment terms, sent out just a basic form letter to everybody saying, yep, this
Yeah.
is what we're doing with your payment terms starting, next week.
Yeah. We just got one of those from QuickBooks or whatever, where we're depositing your money into your account now once it's paid to us within 5 days, not next day.
QuickBooks, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, great. You get another 4 days of float to help the economy. I'm like, and we have no control over it. And this
Right.
is, they say, like the final stages of an economic breakdown are where all those things happen, where all the rules by the big boys just get broken. And suddenly like the mortgage rates are, 18%. People who are getting paid
Well,
through electronic vendors are getting paid 10 days later, not the same day.
and I mean, those kinds of things would work to our advantage, as with Costco,
Yeah.
because we were just a straightforward operator. Part of it was they knew they weren't going to get a letter saying, hey, by the way, vendor, dear blank vendor, we're reducing your payment terms by, 5 days effective next week. They knew that just wasn't going to happen because that didn't happen with Costco. And they also knew that if we negotiated 15 cents on a product, that 15 cents went into the cost of goods. And that cost of goods is what we directly calculated our net landed cost against. And we had a ceiling of 14% margin.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have lost the battle by, having to reduce their price by 15 cents. I don't know, I'm making this up on the fly. In some ways, they won the war because they weren't giving 15 cents to Costco. Costco wasn't negotiating for that 15 cents. That 15 cents went into their sell price, went into their cost,
Yep.
and their sell price went down 15 cents, which means hopefully, because that's slightly cheaper, it's going to drive slightly more volume. And that all fits into the strategy of driving, lower prices, drive volume. So the vendor won even when they lost. As a salesperson, calling on Walmart or, many other retailer, those
Mm-hmm.
guys are always, other retailers are negotiating for stuff because they need to enhance profitability. That's got to be tough as a sales guy. You got to give up whatever it is, 15 cents. That just goes to, the big retailer in the sky. You're not sure
Yeah.
where that money goes. It kind of falls into some big cloud of cash somewhere. We would leverage the fact, and we knew that we had a trust level with our sales guys, that sales teams, that's going to go into the cost of goods. We don't
Yeah.
have any place to put it, even if we wanted to. We don't have a bucket or a war fund or a treasure chest or a
Yeah.
you
There's no column for it.
there's no column for that. It
Yeah.
goes into net landed cost, period.
What piece of
And people
advice?
like working with ethical companies.
Oh, they love it. Yeah. I mean, we've seen so many who aren't. And I think
Yeah,
that's the deregulation when you're in a startup environment. I mean, anybody can start a company. Anybody can, especially in e-commerce, right? The amount of people who maybe get in today and out tomorrow as a business idea. It's a beautiful and tragic part about America, right? Is anybody and everybody can start a business. Few people can do it well. And I think we tend to hear about the people who are in the startup phase where, maybe they aren't doing it well, but it seems like they are. Where when you get into the enterprise value, the nice part is they report into Wall Street. You know exactly the structure of their company. At least from a financial model how their makeup is and what their core DNA is, what's important to them. And I
yeah,
feel
got a
like,
lot more insurances.
yeah, there's so much out there that with AI now, I mean, anybody can scoop an annual report in 10 seconds and get the right things to say, but yet so few people are doing that even. So it's like, just because we have the tools, it doesn't replace the innate curiosity to dig for that alignment. Because I think it's a little more nuanced than just lining up things on a 401k
Right.
or an annual report, pardon me.
Right.
How do you think people studied you prior to engaging with you, or did they just show up and say, hey, who are you? I'm this person.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It would be interesting to talk to some of the folks that would come in and talk to us and say, what did you do to practice to,
The prep.
I think the ones that don't have a lot of blank, that don't really understand how to work with a club, for example, a Costco in this case, would go to the way they would hire a broker. I think they would kind of take the easy way out, and then they would use that broker to educate them. Hopefully they have a broker who understands the business and can articulate it to them and steer them in the right direction. And there's a lot of them that really can, that really do a nice job. Doing a lot of homework. If you're a small company and you're starting up out of the blue, I don't know that a lot of them did a lot of homework, right? I
Why
think they
not?
would talk to their friends. They would get a phone number. We have regional offices. So wherever you are in the country, there's generally a regional office that's within 1,000 miles, maybe the furthest, generally a lot closer than that, 500 miles, whatever, wherever you are, there's a regional office, a regional buying office for the food business at least. And so there's somebody that you can talk to. And I would get calls all the time from people, hey, I make this widget, and, I've sold 12 of them out of my garage, and I was wondering if Costco would be interested. I probably got, I don't know, one of those a week.
Yeah. Did any of them ever end up on the shelf?
Not generally, not very many. Every once in a while, maybe, but not very often. I kind of had my spiel, and I would talk to them for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And hey, you're learning to swim in the middle of the ocean. And get some small retailers and small local retailers. Learn how to make product. Learn how to sell product. Learn how to create invoices.
Yes.
Learn how to handle production issues. Learn how to source inventory. Just start learning your ins and outs of doing retail, and then go to a larger, and then see if you can go to, Publix or Albertsons or a larger grocery store. And, once you've got doing business figured out, then let's have a conversation, and then we can talk. But until then, it would be silly for you to come to Costco and try to learn how to sell product.
Yeah. Get paid net 60 and put it up front. Sort of that world. It's very interesting. So you have this will make, by the way, I think it will make a very good podcast, just so you know, because we cut everything up. So if you're cool with it, I'd love to just use this. Very storytelling nature in your responses, which is great. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to kind of wrap up and do the whole, where can people find you? The last question I ask is probably going to take some thought and consideration. What was the most memorable negotiation you've ever been a part of?
And I'm not sure how much information I should divulge. I guess that's my biggest pause, frankly. But we've had a lot of conversations with. Do I say the name? Do you edit the name out?
It's up to you.
Where do I
You
go
could
with
just say a
that?
large retailer or a large, you could give us a hint.
Okay, well, I'll just say a large premium chocolate manufacturer. They have a variety of lines. Their brand stands out as a brand, but underneath that brand, they have levels of quality, from really a very average quality at the bottom of the tier, up to super premium top tier, some of the best product that you can buy at their top tier. And so there's a lot of positioning, I guess, of products under that brand. So they highlight the brand, they sell the product, but they target the product for the retail environment that protects their image the best that they want to protect that image.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm positioning that
You
well.
are. It makes sense.
What we always wanted was, we wanted their top tier product. Don't treat us like a retailer. Don't treat us, like a grocery store or a Target or somebody like that, because that's not the customer.
Yeah.
And we had lots and lots of, and this is a global conversation, by the way. This isn't just for the US. We're working with our global teams.
Yeah.
And we're doing business with this company in Europe, in Mexico, Australia, in Asia. And we're looking for the top tier. What is it going to take for us? How do we get that top tier product? And if it flew in the face of everything their marketing teams do, everything that their brand development teams do. However, we do a tremendous amount of business with them as a company and with some of their subsidiaries. And so the conversations were long and extensive. In some cases, they went on for over a year, and they were global. And we were trying to get, the president of the company. They had some transitions happening at the top levels of their company. And so we built some pretty nice relationships with their new president, and got really got that person on board to some degree, in understanding who we cater to as a customer, that we're not, that we're really catering to that high end customer that's going to be in these other places as well. They're shopping at your super high end boutique shops. they're also coming in for their day-to-day needs with us, and we can cater to those same people, right? Face to face. They were great conversations. We made a lot of headway. We're still, we're not where we want to be. We Costco, we will probably never quite be where we, have their absolute top tier product, but we got much better, continue to ratchet up the quality of product that they were willing to put in their box, and to do that globally, the Costco umbrella across the globe. And so we'll continue to push and
Yeah,
continue to develop that relationship and continue to move volume and hopefully get them to, continue to ratchet that up.
I love it. Todd, where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best place to find me.
Todd spelled with one D, not twos. That's
That
important.
is true. That
Yeah.
is true.
Todd, thank you. This was, it's funny. We came into this, thinking like, let's have a good conversation. We'll maybe record later. I think that's a great way to have a podcast. I tell everybody that is like, let's just record a conversation. And we know you have the right answers and we don't want them to be canned because we want them to be real, as if we kind of stopped you. So Todd, thank you so much for spending some time and sharing some of those war stories. And we got a little philosophical today. I'm sure I'll edit my stuff out, but I think people do want to hear kind of what people are going through, and then they can relate it back to business in a way that hopefully allows for more storytelling for people like us.
Well, great. Well, it's been fun. It's been a nice conversation. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd.